In this video and the following, we are covering the fricatives and the affricates. Fricatives are sounds that are produced when the air passes through a narrowing and produces a hiss or a friction noise. So the articulatory organs are not in full contact, there is just a narrow passage for the air. We call this a critical narrowing, and it is critical in different senses. So there is a difficult balance. If you put the articulatory organs just a bit closer, they will be touching each other, so that already makes a stop. And if they're not too close to each other, that's just an approximation that will make an approximate. So it is very, very difficult to attain the specific distance between the articulatory organs. And another sense in which we call this critical narrowing is that there is also a balance between, well, the actual width of the constriction and the amount of airflow that is input through that constriction. So for the same narrowing, higher airflow will probably produce friction noise with higher chances than a lower airflow. And fricatives are the only manner of articulation that can be produced at any place of articulation, right? So you can really get this critical narrowing at any place along the vocal tract. That's why we have so many fricatives, and we have split them into different videos. And also because it is feasible to produce fricatives at any point, at any place of articulation, it is possible to create a continuous variation. So in principle, you should be able to slide a fricative, starting, for example, in your lips and moving it backwards to your glottis, and make all the in-between stages something like alright, so yeah, that should be actually a good drill for you to practice, so I encourage you to do that. One aspect that we have to bear in mind is also the possibility for fricatives to be voiceless or voiced. So I'm sure most of you are already used to the contrast between, for example, S and Z, okay? So the S is voiceless, you don't get vocal fold vibration, whereas the Z, right, is a voiced sound. Also, a good exercise to practice would be to create alternating series of okay, and it is usually easier if you start with the voiced part, and then of course you can try this for any other place of articulation, like okay. So with this kind of exercises, you should be able to gain control, like conscious control over your glottal action. So I will start explaining like the different pairs for each place of articulation. First of all, we have the bilabial fricatives. This is like blowing the candles off a birthday cake, right? So you go like, and that would be the consonant. So it's similar to an F, but it is made with both lips, like just doing like this. Okay, so that would make ha, afa, afa, af. And the voiced counterpart, va, ava, ava, av. Okay, and they're transcribed with these Greek letters, a phi or a beta. Auditorily, they're very easily confused with the labiodental fricatives. These are like English F and V. But of course, you always get the visual cues to make the difference more recognizable. So I will repeat the bilabial voiceless fricative, fa, and now the labiodental, fa. Okay, so for the labiodental, of course, you get your teeth, your upper teeth, on your lower lip. Okay. All right, so you have fa, afa, afa, af, and va, ava, ava, av. Especially for V, it is pretty common that in certain positions at some points, you don't exert the necessary amount of airflow for the noise to happen. So in that case, you actually get an approximant. So the narrowing is not critical anymore, or for that amount of narrowing, you would need more airflow to get the hiss. And since you don't do that, you don't make that effort, you get this sound instead, which is transcribed as a split V. Okay, or sometimes something like this. You have that a few lines lower in the IPA chart. So you can do like a full fricative, driving, or if it is not so reinforced, then you have driving. It's still labiodental, but you can't really hear the noise of the friction. Next, we have the dentals, which are actually interdentals. You can have this s, right? This is the lisp. So the tongue is in between the upper and lower teeth, and then the voiced version is the. Also for this one, it is pretty common to get approximate versions of it. So sometimes you won't hear the noise like the, that's possibly too exaggerate, and when you get just ada, okay, then you will represent it with the approximant diacritic. So there are many types of S. They are all alveolar because the narrowest point along the vocal tract is located around the alveolar ridge. But depending on the position of the tongue, you can get different varieties. And if you want to specify, you can do that by using different diacritics. Otherwise, you would just write S. The first possibility is an apical S. That means that the apex, or the tongue tip, is facing upward, and that's the part that is located at the alveolar constriction, right? So this kind of S produces a lower resonance because of this cavity here under the tongue. So you have a greater volume cavity, and that means that you will get a lower frequency. So imitating the shape of the tongue, which is pointing upwards, you get this square bracket pointing upwards here to mark the fact that it is apical. Right, on the other hand, you can get the tongue tip facing downward. So it is actually the dorsum or the pre-dorsum of the tongue which is making the constriction at the alveolar region. Then the cavity here is smaller. You get higher frequencies as resonance for this type of S. And so yeah, we call this a dorsal or a pre-dorsal S, and we mark this with the square bracket facing downward, also imitating like the position of the tongue. This is actually the same diacritic that we use to signal dentality, if you can recall from other videos. And then there is something in between those, which is actually the tongue tip just flat, horizontally, like facing to the front. And then we transcribe this with this kind of rectangle under the main symbol of the S. That's actually the union of these two brackets, right? So a bracket facing downward and a bracket upward, and then you put them together and you get that little rectangle here. Okay? Fine. So yeah, that would be sa, asa, asa, as. Or in the voiced version, za, aza, aza, az. Then you get this esh, which is the sound for sh. To achieve that, you have to place your predorsum in the postalveolar region. So that will make this sound as sha, asha, asha, ash, and it has a much lower frequency than S does. And then there is the voiced postalveolar fricative, which is transcribed with a yop. This is like a 3-shaped Z, and it sounds like ja, aja, aja, aj. Alright. Actually, I'm trying to exaggerate a little bit the noisy part of these sounds. Like in real life, most of the time, this wouldn't be so exaggerate, and you can get something softer, such as ja, aja, aja, aj. Okay? And anyway, also this is just like a prototype, but the specific implementation in different languages that have this sound could also differ to some extension. Okay, and then we have the retroflex fricatives, sha, asha, asha, ash, and ja, aja, aja, aj. Okay? And now let's see what happens with the affricates here on the upper row. So affricates are actually a subtype of stop. The difference between an aspirated stop and an affricated stop is that the noise that you get after the release is homorganic with the stop constriction in the case of affricates, whereas in aspirates you invariably get a glottal noise. Here, as you see, if we are having a labial constriction, then you also get a labial noise. And here you are in the alveolar region, and here in the post-alveolar region. Okay, so that would be fa, up, or va, ab, and then tsa, ats, or za, adza, and cha, acha, ach, and ja, aja, aj. Remember that affricates should be transcribed with the ligature on top of the two symbols.